This evening, we are privileged to have Lord John Pentland with us, who represents the Gurdjieff Foundation in the United States and Canada. He's also associated with Madame de Zaltzman in the foundation in Paris. We also have Paul Renard here with us. And
Marilyn.
Marilyn, where is she?
She was
at the back, right. And Lord Pentland is going to speak to you, preparing yourself for changes in situations under certain conditions or under conditions of in the work. It isn't exactly the title, but I think that's close enough to suffice. I don't think that he needs any further introduction because all of you have heard about him. You know who he is. So at this time, we will be hearing from Lord John Pentland.
Thank you, John. Sitting here with you and coming here from a 1-acre lot in San Francisco to these really beautiful surroundings. In the evening, after the movements, is an opportunity for me, a challenge. And I think I should begin by saying something about beauty. I don't know whether all of you have read John Bennett's book about the Shiva Puri Baba. Is there anybody who hasn't? The Shiva Puri Baba was the Indian boy brought up near Calicut on the west coast of southern India, who told his father when he was a young man that he wanted to go to the Himalayas to seek spiritual fulfillment. His father was quite wealthy and said, well, in case you ever need it, I'm going to bury your inheritance of money in the ground here, and showed him where. And the boy went off, and it took him a very, very long time to arrive at self-fulfillment. So that when he was 80 years old, he came back and dug up the money. And by this time, it was the 1890s. And then he decided to travel around the world on foot, except across the oceans. And he met with Queen Victoria and I think President Teddy Roosevelt and so on. And eventually got back after 40 years and was given a compound in Kathmandu in Nepal, and was visited in about 1951 or 52 by John Bennett with two Miss Merstons, two sisters who were part of the group of Bennett. And I happen to have a tape of their conversation somewhere. You've got that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it must have been surroundings like these, because this English lady was, of course, very shy about speaking to the Shiva Puri Baba. But eventually the surroundings were such that she opened up and she said something like, "What a beautiful place for that." And the Shiva Paribala said, "Ah, beauty." And now meeting in the name of Gurdjieff, we are meeting in the name of someone who went beyond beauty and ugliness. What's beyond beauty and ugliness is myself. And so when George Cornelius invited me to come to this wonderful gathering and told me that it had three purposes, of which the principal one was the further study of Gurdjieff's teachings, and made that very clear, I said, certainly I'd be glad to come if he would allow, which he did, that the gathering would have a fourth purpose, namely that it would be an experiment. And you all understand, I think, that the action on us of an experiment is important every time we come to work, because every time we come to work, we bring with us the unconscious parts. And it's only through an attitude of experiment that we are able, while working, to question ourselves, and we are able, after the experiment is over, to evaluate it correctly in accordance with the aim. So an experiment like we are making here is an entirely new opportunity for self-discovery, and I'm very concerned, and you need to be concerned, that we make the very maximum best use of this opportunity, because we never know when there'll be another. We need to bring to it, our past experience, our past understanding of work, of past experiments, but at the same time to be turning again and again to the actual situation, here, now, and not allowing our minds to get cluttered up with remembering everything that was useful in the past. And so running away from this new opportunity. This is the attitude that I'm looking for now, to be questioning myself. I ask you also to question yourself whether in fact I'm seeing more how passive I am in falling into the grooves of past associations and what would be possible in the sense of taking responsibility for the present moment through responding to some higher call. If any one of you wants to be able to try and follow me, you could think of some strong impression that you've had, perhaps here, or perhaps from before you came here, where you had a strong impression in relation to somebody and the awkwardness of your behavior at that moment towards that person. And afterwards, you, perhaps at night when you're relaxed in bed, it comes back to you and you wonder, what should I have done to get out of this awkwardness? What should I have done? And can you follow me? You have something like that in mind? What should I have done? And what I'm trying to say is that what should I have done is just reacting to the memory of this impression. Man cannot do, I cannot do, and what should I have done is just the same old story. Yes? So is it possible to simultaneously be present to the association or the emotion or the impulse and to the call of something else? Because without that, there would be no real experience of responsibility or real suffering for my non-responsibility. I can spend an awful lot of time, an awful lot of my life in that kind of what should I have done? And imagining that in working out a solution, I'm making progress in the work. But in fact, of course, I'm going round and round in circles. So some of you may be amateur artists of one kind or another. Not amateur exactly, but spare time artists, one kind or another. And like I am. And the other day, I was trying quickly to make a little watercolor painting, and I was able to get in the mountains and trees, and even to have some kind of perspective, or something with the little plants, the path close to me. And when I got it nearly finished, I noticed there was a kind of blank hole in the very middle. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I had to stop and go for a walk before I could understand what was in the middle. I don't know if you've ever had that kind of lesson shown to you as clearly as I did. In any case, in speaking of reacting, I'm contrasting it with responsibility. As if, in the present moment, there is a sort of choice between being taken by the reaction or being called by the higher presence to a manifestation which is truly corresponding to the situation I'm in. A call towards the whole of myself, towards responsibility for the whole of myself, and at the same time a call to responsibility towards the whole of the community and towards a direct fulfillment of the real needs of the community at that moment, irrespective of what my thoughts and associations and what the pulls on me of the thoughts and emotions and associations of my companions may be. Of course, it isn't really a choice. Anybody who's been in our work as seriously as you have and been through this week, you will see that I'm taken one way or the other. It's only afterwards, it's only now, the end of the day, that I begin to ponder, I suppose is not quite the right word, but I begin to think over how I was during the day, and I begin to understand what would be meant, if I were able to be present to it, by the idea of two levels of attention. One that reacts to what's going on mechanically, and another attention that is in touch with the parts of myself and the other parts of the community. Real responsibility begins when I'm present to both these sides at the time, when I have an attention which is able to hear the call at the same time as I feel the pull of the unconscious parts of myself, the resistance. It is, in a way, a step towards real responsibility if I'm able not just to recognize the mistake, the way I was taken by the mechanical side, but instead of correcting it in my mind, am able to suffer for it. Can you understand me so far? am able to feel a deflation of the ego for that. which doesn't go away, and which has a sort of bitter taste, but it isn't a bad taste, really. A sort of sour, bitter taste, but it's the same taste of coming to myself. Now, of course, we are all of us together. Yes. Now, of course, what I'm speaking about is what you're all familiar with. It's the question of real will. And I hope I can say, if you'll allow me, George, that we're all together in front of that question. Yourself and myself and all of us. And some of us have experienced the question, have confronted the question more, and some of us have confronted it less. But this is a question which we share all together. Nobody is giving the answer. And that's what a real human question is like, in my opinion. Now, this is an oral tradition. Never forget that. I hope I'm right in that. You agree? Yes. Yeah. There are a few of us here to whom Gurdjieff spoke personally. And in relation to this subject, he said, in any case to me personally, several times, many times, inwardly or interior, he put it, not identify, outwardly, exterior, play a role. You've heard that before, yes? Interior, not identity. Not outwardly play a role, interior, not identify. Interior, not identify, exterior, play a role. And many of us have been able to relate to this sort of capsuled understanding of all of his work, at least in quiet conditions, in sittings, and in movements. And what I'm proposing is that some of us even have been able to stabilize an understanding of that after years and years of new starts. Have been able to, as it were, experience the process of separating the energy of sensation from the thoughts, from the energy of thoughts, and separating the moments when we touch a real feeling from the energy of sensation. And in that sense, we've made progress towards understanding. We've stabilized some understanding of what it means to be present to myself. Interior, not identify, exterior, play a role. In quiet conditions, some of us have been able to stabilize some of that understanding, but having left the quiet conditions, having left the movement class, having left the work week, conditions in which we were able to separate the different levels of energy and then follow while they naturally came together. Having left these conditions and returning to the conditions of our ordinary lives, sooner or later some unpredictable occasion has arisen, a crisis of some sort, and the understanding which we had stabilized has destroyed itself. And we've had to begin again from the beginning. Can you follow that? Yeah?
Yes.
So, we had to make a new start. And here we actually are making a new start. And one of the questions, perhaps one of the more important questions that's in front of me, is, will this understanding that we are bringing together here which is beginning to be stabilized after all these days of hard work, will it, when we go back into our ordinary lives and meet some unpredictable crisis, will this understanding again destroy itself? And in that case, is the Gurdjieff work a matter of perseverance, of going on and on, starting from the beginning? If there's an octave like do, re, mi, starting from the beginning, going up to the interval. Or is there some other hope? Can you follow what I'm saying? Have we missed something? Something that would give us a real feeling of hope, not just a kind of dogged perseverance, stubborn perseverance. Or of course there would be another alternative which I'm not including, which is there something missing in the Gurdjieff teaching? Some people have felt there was, but that's not an alternative that I'm including. I think there is something which I've missed, and I discovered that several years ago when I was engaged with a text from the East and found that the monks were being advised to work more. And little by little, I believe I understand something about what is this more. More comes from the same root as the word magus or magic. So, more is magic. Gurdjieff himself pointed out that every traditional teaching that's been brought to this planet gets distorted in the very first generation after the death of the founder. And he says in Beelzebub that this is because of the impatience of the teacher's followers who wanted once to collect together everything that the teacher left behind without separating out what is essential and important from on what is details. And the fact that Gurdjieff or Beelzebub pointed this out, I think does not mean that his teaching is any exception. Although he does say that this did not happen with the teaching of Gurdjieff Shamash. So, the way I look at it, the first step in responsibility is separation. That means separation of the essential from the detail. Of my energies from the forms they take. Of the essence from the personality. And then to be able to let the forms go, to let the details go, forget them, let them pass out of the mind. And for this process to go on without my getting stuck in the forms, in the detail, identified, a certain quality is needed, which I call non-directive skill. It is only by developing this quality, which is the accumulated experience in the body and the feeling of sincere searching for oneself, that we shall advance towards real individuality and not go round and round in a vicious circle, imagining all the time that we are making progress towards the goal. A non-directive skill means that here, as in every other work, there are exercises and techniques and rules which have to be learned from others with more experience, as well as from Gurdjieff's books, and of course from our own mistakes. But all of these are to be regarded as examples. And as no more than a scaffolding for understanding of my self in similar conditions and situations to those for which they were given. None of the techniques and exercises and rules are fixed or final. Their use depends on non-directive skill. That is, on an almost intuitive understanding of my present state and of what seems to me to be the direction of the movement towards awakening. I don't know myself. I don't know what is coming next. Perhaps the whole of human life on earth is now at a moment of crisis. Through the 60s and 70s, there was this tremendous opening of young people's minds towards the idea of, towards the work of self-awareness and towards Eastern teachings about consciousness. But now this movement on a worldwide scale may have come to an end. I don't know. We don't know. In any case, on that scale too, the movement can only go to a certain point, where it reaches a stop, where it reaches an interval. And if it doesn't go beyond the interval, it's entirely possible that the whole of humanity will destroy itself. George Cornelius's idea for the center here to exist as a favorable place for a refuge is connected with that. We don't know. It might be very useful. Gurdjieff, as far as I know, pointed again and again to the pitifully low state, level of our culture, and the inevitability of a war between his new ideas and all the old ideas. But I never heard him make any specific prophecies of immediate collapse of human life on Earth. Coming back to the scale of our community here, the question is already arising for you as the days come to an end. Will the new understanding that you've gained destroy itself when some unforeseen crisis arises in our lives at home? In other words, I'm putting the question for the first time in my experience. What is a work week? You all seem to be very happy here, together, and a good direction, in splendid condition. And of course, I could hardly not be happy having a lot of people listening to me. But what is work? And I think we need to ask these questions now, while the work is going on. What is the more that I seem to receive, and even seem to be able to give, in a work week? The magic. How to understand the relative openness and freedom from fear of each other. And understand it in such a way that what we've gained is not lost. You are all familiar with the idea, Gurdjieff's idea of the octave, as it develops sequentially in time or horizontally. And if you've been observant, you will have seen it operating in you and in the construction, in the kitchen, wherever you've been working here. With the interval, the difficulty that inevitably arises when we meet with some obstacle unexpectedly and our minds are confused and distracted, so that I miss that little opportunity to come in touch with a feeling of self-responsibility. It's very good to experience the law of octaves like that, as a law behind not only the big crises, but behind every little detail of our lives and energies as they go out from us and return. But we also need to begin young to try to understand the law of octaves vertically. As if all the notes are there, all the levels are there at the same time, at the same moment, within me. And what is difficult is first of all to separate these levels and to observe that separation also with my mind, which has been educated to think in quite different categories, and which resists these new categories of the different energies, each of which has its own characteristic vibration, nature, speed, and so on. And it's even difficult to remember in my head that there are these categories, man 1, 2, and 3, and that they are separated by an interval from man 4 and 5. We start with self-observation, and by practicing it, we move up over the years, do, re, mi. But to go beyond self-observation to the work of self-development, that would be 4 and 5, yes? You agree with that? To go beyond self-observation to the work which is properly called self-development, and which begins at far, if you like, is not what we are apt to think it is, using our ordinary categories. At least not in my opinion. You can question the statement. I have no right to make general statements. I'm just sharing my ideas with you, and I hope not putting them provocatively at all. I don't mean to. But I don't think that what is beyond self-observation, self-development, is to mentally know what my weaknesses are, what my type is, and to be able to remember that and correct it. So what is beyond self-observation? You want to say? What is self-development?
Transformation.
What?
Transformation?
Yes. What is transformation? The work begins with self-observation. So what goes beyond self-observation? What practice?
Self-remembering.
The power to see, to be separate from the observer, to lose the observer.
Yes, it's true, it's right. But you could put it very simply. What goes beyond self-observation is more self-observation. Being able to observe myself all the time instead of just at the moment, which is seeing. Self-observation itself is a meeting point of the level, the part that sees and the part that is seen. You understand me? And what goes beyond self-observation is to be responsible for self-observation, to be able to self-observe myself all the time, not just sometimes. So, In fact, if we begin to develop this capacity a little in quiet time, and for instance, at movement, we begin to see ourselves. Yeah, we begin to see the forces, the action of the energy in myself. And I think that maybe one of the reasons why the movements are called the movements, because they're not just outer attitudes, but an inner movement that goes on as a result of doing these outer attitudes with attention. Yeah? So, in order to be innerly free, to interior not identify, there's some kind of inner movement that's necessary, as I understand it, which is greatly assisted in quiet conditions and in movement, but which I still don't understand enough to be able to follow in life conditions. And I might say, not in any way to oppose, really, not in any way to oppose what we're doing at the foundation, to what is done in our group. But that this would explain, if you wonder about it, why at the foundation we never display the Enneagram in any outer form at all. Yeah? This might explain it. If you think we're trying to keep it secret and forget about it, you're wrong. But that's why it's regarded by us as the sacred symbol, which, since very few people understand it, it's better to keep it private. So what I'm trying to say, and I try and bring this to an end, what I'm trying to evoke is that a real work begins with the work of separation. Separating. Freeing the living Gurdjieff teaching from all the other remembered teachings and traditions. Separating our energies according to their separate natures and speeds. Separating the essence energies from the forms they take and their content. Separating people at the different stages of work, those who already have a taste of an inner life from those who are learning the ideas, and so on. And when everything is separated correctly, the separate parts flow together naturally. There's an openness, a sharing, a relationship between the levels. And that is what enables the interval to be passed. But until the interval is passed, the relationship between the levels which exists in temporary conditions falls apart, and the process has to begin again from the beginning, separating things out. That's what I think. For instance, great art like the Enneagram or the movements, Gurdjieff, or great ideas, like for me, and I think it's different for different people. The idea man cannot do. An idea like that has an action on me. It enters me. It comes into my mind. It informs my mind. When I'm in the right attitude, great art, great ideas inform my mind. All at once, put my mind in order. Separate the levels so that I can be sitting in this chair, and even from a book of Gurdjieff, I can open it, an idea, suddenly I'm present for a moment. But immediately afterwards, some impulse comes up. I must go out and do that thing I forgot to do yesterday. I must even go to the door and answer the bell. And it all falls apart. And I have to start again from the beginning. So, what seems to be the problem is that I have too many burdens on my mind, unconsciously lurking, like burdens on my back. And I have to try and attend to things more carefully, one at a time, so that these burdens fall off my back. Because there is a presence back of me. Which, when I'm empty enough, when I've lightened the burden, is calling me, to which I respond. And that's what I will finish with. I think there's a very good exercise to be tried in relation to that. For instance, even tomorrow you have a busy day, and if you wish, you could choose and decide beforehand some person that you're going to have to meet, and to speak to about something necessary, to give some information to get information from. And you don't know when you will meet him or her, but suddenly you're in front of them, and you try all at once to be present, to let the burdens fall off your back, and observe what happens. Yeah? And you'll have the whole day to do it in. And even if there's, and I'm afraid I'm a little bit anticipating, because there may be a task given tomorrow. I don't know. But this could be an extra thing. We have to understand what it means, new categories of thinking. For instance, in regard to time, there's another exercise which I would recommend. you see how we tend to categorize our time? You know? Get up bell, 6:30. From the moment we all finish supper until the get up bell, you regard as your time. But the get up bell, 6:30, that's no longer your time. Morning city, 7:15, that's not your time. But from when that's over, you have 10 minutes, that's your time. Then the thing at 8. Silent breakfast, that's not your time. Then there's 10 minutes before practical work, that's your time. Practical work, that's not your time. But in a way, it's all my time. If I could, interior not identify, why don't I make use of this time? The dressing and getting up, sitting, the breakfast. I'm here voluntarily. So the whole of tomorrow is your time. That's the other exercise. Yes, if anybody wants to tear what I said to pieces, I'll be very glad. But I shall defend it. I think it's very important what we're doing. I don't know whether I've been able to make that clear. I mean, extra important. We're not going to have that many more new starts. But something should really come of this. It's therefore very, very important.
One small question. You talked about the separation of the different qualities when people form a group. And then also a separation of the qualities within themselves. So that then, in order to overcome the next interval, there could be a joining together of similar forces, did I understand you properly? Of similar qualities, so that there will be a greater quantity of a given quality to overcome that interval.
No, I think what I was trying to say was that it seems as if when I'm in front of you, for instance, as if I was doing the very best I could to give my attention to what you've said. Right? But somewhere there's more attention. Without that, I'm not going to really penetrate below the personality, below the prison in which you live and I live. And the conversation will just be superficial. Now, what is this more attention I can give, to be more present? And I think it requires what I call non-directed skill. I don't think it's the least use my trying to impress you. And it's certainly no use my being afraid of you. So what is this? If you can think of a better word for it, I'd be glad. I think the best word I can find is non-directed skill. An intensely observant state in which I'm taking advantage, as little as I do, as much as I can, of past experience, to try to be present to myself and not be so taken by an impatience to convince you or answer you, but more by a conviction that I could be more present. that I could even be a kind of bearer of some conscious thought. I think that's what's needed. I think I have to be impatient to affirm myself by giving an answer. But what's needed is more attention. It's very simple anyway. It's all there. And people are writing any number of books. I was looking at a book last night in which a man in a guidebook on meditation said it's always useful to put on a half smile. And it's not bad advice anyway. But even that doesn't always work. You know what I mean? I was talking yesterday to a couple who were having trouble in their marriage. I said to the girl, you know, a great thing for a woman is to be cheerful. And she said, that's the one thing my husband can't stand. Because I'm always so cheerful. Will you think of a non-directive skill? Yeah?
When I tried to listen to that, and when you just said it again, when you said the word about
Can't
skill,
hear you. Leonard?
yes, I will speak up. The word skill seems to me to imply something that you gather over time by keeping improving yourself.
Definitely.
And so you move from self-observation as you develop this skill and the ability to do more self-observation. Is that in your opinion, like a continuing process, or is there the break there that me thought it's something else? The way I've always felt is that I'm just sort of in a holding pattern, trying to get up the whatever to really make the effort to start working. And I'm not really sure what that effort what has to enter there. But is that the same sort of thing, or is it just a continual?
No, I tried to touch on that when I said that, of course, we have to pay for every inch of the way. So, all right, we go from do to re to mi. And even if there's no inflation, the payment is very great to get to mi.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're not always aware how much we pay because I'm not present when I'm negative. And so we often forget how much we paid, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You follow me?
Yes.
But we paid a great deal when we get to me, so much that we seem to have nothing more left to pay with. And I'm saying this is the point at which more is needed. And I'm saying this more comes from somewhere like magic. What is the more? But we're right in front of that, because without that, just doggedly to persevere, having seen again and again our little house of understanding destroy itself, is just stubbornness.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gurdjieff said that once you've observed something 3 times, you ought to know it. And just think how many times I've observed seeing my thoughts go round and round and round. And I still allow that to be a useful occupation. Yeah. I think one of our greatest difficulties, my greatest difficulty, is impatience. In knowing myself and in knowing others. There's such a hurry to get things in order. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions?
I'd like to talk about more a little bit more. I am not sure what I understood you to say. I'm sort of thinking that you said if you work more, you'll get past doing that. But then I hear you say that you do those thought patterns anyway. So the work more is not maybe what you said. Would you say more about that?
Well, of course, as usual, the right way to begin thinking about that, or about anything, is what is it not? So, work more is not going into details, telling anecdotes, and so forth. You follow me? Everybody likes a story, but that's just for attracting attention. Then the painful process of self-observation, cross-sectioning my life, is the work. You follow me?
I lost you in the middle of that. I was with you and now I've lost you again.
Yeah. Well, what you try, what is your work? If you would care to say what your work is, what you try, it would be much easier to relate to your question. What do you try?
My inner work or?
Yes.
Well, I could better relate to that in what I want to be able than what I try.
Yeah, but you will never come to be able without trying. There's a kind of training, put it that way. How do you look at the work of training yourself?
I haven't done much of that. I'm sort of new to this, so.
You need to do that. You see, even though it's pretty far out and you can say this more is magic, it doesn't just drop from heaven. And yet it does drop from heaven. So what is it? There's something up to us, training ourselves to be luckier. Don't you think?
I think.
That's what I think.
And I'm not sure.
I'm quite sure. There's something up to us. I'm quite certain of that. And if you're not sure, that's your problem.
I'm aware of that.
You have to work at that with conviction. If you're not sure, you see, you must have seen it yourself, but you have to be quite sure that, as I think St. Augustine said, God sends the wind, but you have to pull up your sails. Something's up to you. And you you know, that's not just mental dreaming. Getting the sails up is heavy work. Very good work for a woman. Otherwise, you just drift about. There's some kind of training, not physical training, training of the mind. What is that? That's the question. I say it's non-directive skill.
I wanted to ask two things. One, in terms of the impatience, I know I'm impatient, but part of it is that we're also told that we have so little time. And I see how I've gone more than halfway through my life, and I can't see that it's had any value. If I'm honest with myself, it's nothing. I haven't really contributed to anything. I would hope that my work might contribute somehow to life, but I can't be certain of that. Just a hope. As far as I know from my own experience, I haven't really done anything worthwhile by being alive. So I am impatient because I don't want the rest of my life to be a waste, and there isn't all that much time left if I've gotten this far without doing anything. The other thing is when we do go home from here, how to what I tried to say at lunch, how to keep the work is something in the forefront, because I see that I tend to let it drift, that if I'm not involved in some activity with other people who are working, that, I go through my day, and if there's enough things to fill it in my ordinary life, I don't think about the work really at all once I've gotten up. And I don't want it that way, but something takes over, and it frightens me, because how can something that one values so much can one treat so insignificantly? So everything's upside down, because unimportant details in one's life one spends so much time on.
Right. You see, what I was trying to say is that we're very impatient, but just with one little movement in myself, I can have everything at once. It's not just a question of being patient. I like very much the saying of Japanese Zen master about 400 years ago, Gurdjieff, who said, enter here so that everyone may succeed at once. We had everything at once by this movement. So, in a way, conversations about how to be more patient or something don't help. But you see, if tomorrow morning when you wake up, you think, the whole of today is my time. I'm here voluntarily. And it's true, I have to speak to him. But it's still my time, my opportunity. Why do I categorize that as not my time? Could you start with that? The whole day is my time. Sometimes you will be speaking, sometimes you will be listening, sometimes you will be fasting, sometimes you'll be eating. But it's interesting to look upon it as not categorized. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And if you get that started here, maybe some of that would carry over when you go home. It's not simple. Not simple.
Paul, can you raise your hand?
when you talked about the Enneagram, and I didn't quite understand the reasoning for not actually using the symbol of the Enneagram in your foundation.
Yes, I didn't want to stir up unnecessary questions about that. Maybe you don't really have any question about that. And if you haven't, I've nothing to say. But, or have you?
Well, in my little attempts to study the Enneagram, I found it extremely useful for myself.
That's wonderful. Yes?
And I don't really.
I do. I have a question that's very similar to his about the Enneagram, in that you said that it was a secret, and that if it was a secret, then no one could understand it, or something. I mean, if it's a secret, then it's not known, or something to that order. And I thought, if it's a secret, how would anybody know it, even if it were shown? I didn't understand that.
It's the same word, secret and sacred. I said it was not a secret, but it is a secret in the sense that sacred is the same word as secret.
Yeah.
And it's secret in the sense that we don't understand it as applying to this third world, the world of relationship between levels. Yeah? So if we don't understand it, we don't display it. Now, I've no objection to other people, of course, profiting from it, or even displaying it. There's jewelry being sold everywhere in the shape of the Enneagram. There's a shoe manufacturer who has the Enneagram on the boxes of his shoes. Well, why not? But in case anybody wonders why we don't, so to speak, fly the flag, I was trying to explain that
I appreciate that.
this is the question of real will, if you like.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah?
Yes.
And maybe it was not very artistic to bring in this thorny question, but why not? This is a time to share, to be open with each other. And there it is. This is late in the day, the parable of the vineyard. It's late in the day. Do you know something? Today is Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. On Tuesday, the 9th of August, 2 days ago, do you see the San Francisco Chronicle up here? Probably not.
No.
But on their middle page, they have a thing called the question man. Somebody going around asking questions. And last Tuesday's paper, the day before yesterday, the question was, what author has influenced you? And there are little photographs of the people who the reporter finds. And sure enough, there it was. What author has influenced you? G.I. Gurdjieff in the Chronicle. As the author who'd influenced this person, because I don't have it, of course, from memory, but this girl, it was Janice something, I don't know who it is, she said, I was influenced by this author because he speaks to our minds. He asks questions to our mind. So it's kind of spreading everywhere.
Any more questions?
I have a question.
Well, speak it up. I can't hear you. I don't know
Yeah.
if Lord Pentland can or not, but I certainly can.
Well, my question is about, you spoke about self-responsibility, and that seems to be very difficult for me to really really see that it is up to me, and I can make, efforts here and there, but they don't seem to So my question is about how one can really come to, make that serious effort that is going to mean something to your work.
I think it comes about through the ideas, first of all. The ideas are so true. The ideas of Gurdjieff in Search of the Miraculous and in Gurdjieff's tales are so true that they have an actual effect on our mind. But of course, the mind doesn't have much force in the overall equipage of man. So one goes out and one does the opposite of what one planned to do. All connected with that. We don't recognize the importance of our attitude. My attitude at any point is like the sunken part of the iceberg. And we start out from the conscious part, which is like the tip, and we're quite surprised to meet resistance from this unconscious part. My attitude, which governs me in ordinary life, is largely this resistance. So that one may have an idea like responsibility, which touches me in the morning, but before the morning's over, I've been acting quite irresponsibly. Yeah? So that's why we begin and go on from the point of view of study, self-observation, self-study. In this way, the iceberg is gradually rises out of the water, so that one begins to suspect an attitude. One begins to have a little taste that I'm in bad attitude or hostile attitude. You find that? Then you'll begin to be able to for instance, a little bit like that. If I say something to you, you just nod. You're not sure what you would say there. Yes? It's very difficult. And it's most important for men to learn, be able to not speak back to women. Not always. Yeah?
Lisa, could I ask one more? You say you have this resistance. What kind of a resistance did you have this evening when Paul was teaching the movements? That comes from a different part of you, but what kind of a resistance was there?
Well, it was mostly reacting.
I know, I could see it through you, but I mean, what was it?
I don't quite.
You were smiling when it was over with. I know you got a pleasure out of it. What kind of an effort or resistance was you putting up during that time?
I wanted to be able to do the movement, and
You have to see the resistance. You have to be more aware of the wish to not work.